Hello and welcome to the Fit to Transform podcast, where you learn how to train and diet effectively and, most importantly, how to maintain those results for life, once and for all. I'm Nikias Tomasiello, a transgender training and nutrition coach working online with anyone who's ready for a true lifestyle transformation, anywhere they may be in the world. As a friendly reminder, any and all information provided is for educational purposes only. You should consult with your doctor before implementing any changes to your diet and exercise program. With that disclaimer out of the way, thank you for being here. Now grab yourself a cup of tea or pre-workouts and enjoy. Yo, welcome back to the podcast and thanks for tuning into this solo episode about how to stop blowing your fat loss diet at the weekend. And this is going to be my shortest episode because the answer to this question is very simple. Stop going out at the weekend. You're done. You're welcome. I know I'm a genius and now you can just tune out and carry on with your day. Nah, I'm joking. I have plenty of clients who enjoy being social at the weekend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss 6 of the strategies that I found most effective for them to stay on top of their fat loss goals that I've implemented over the last 6 years plus of coaching. But first, let's address why this matters, because at the end of the day, Saturday and Sunday are only 2 days out of the week. So I want you to gain an insight into how much of an impact they can have. 2 days doesn't seem like a lot, but consider the fact that in order to lose body fat, you need to be in a caloric deficit over a sustained period of time. So not just 24 hours. For example, let's say that you're targeting a 1 pound average weight loss per week on the scale. Based on a rule of thumb I've mentioned in previous podcasts as well, in order to achieve this average loss, you need to eat about 3,500 calories below your maintenance across the week. Because 3,500 calories is the estimated caloric content of a pound of fat. It's not an exact number, but it's close enough that using this heuristic is actually helpful. It yields results. So if you divide 3,500 calories by 7, which is the number of the days in a week, you get 500, which means that you need to subtract 500 calories for your daily maintenance calories from your daily maintenance calories in order to get your daily calorie target to achieve this amount of weight loss. So if you maintain on 2,000 calories, 2,000 minus 500 equals 1,500 calories. So on around 1,500 calories, you can expect to lose about a pound per week. Again, this isn't perfect math. You're not going to see exactly a pound every single week. But on average, if you were to track your body weight on a weekly rolling basis, you would see that over 4, 6, 8 weeks, you're averaging a pound of weight loss per week. On a weekly basis, if you time 1,500 calories times 7, you get 10,500 calories. This is your weekly calorie budget, which means that to lose that 1 pound, you can eat up to 10,500 calories every week, spread over the 7 days. And it doesn't matter if you have 1,500 calories every single day, or if you have 1,800 one day, 2,000 another day, 1,200 another day, as long as when you add all these numbers up, you get 10,500 divided by 7, that's always an average of 1,500 calories. So if, for example, you were to eat 1,500 calories Monday to Friday, and then on Saturday and Sunday, you go up to 3,000 calories on both days, your total weekly calorie consumption becomes 13,500 calories, not 10,500, 13,500. And if you divide 13,500 calories by 7, you get an average of 1,929 calories every single day. If you maintain on 2,000, 1,900 calories is so close to 2,000 that you are going to see some fat loss, but it's certainly not going to be the 1 pound per week that you were targeting. Now, if you were to eat more than 3,000 calories, you might potentially put yourself in a surplus for the week and now see weight gain as opposed to weight loss on the scale over time. And you might think, wow, 3,000 calories sounds like a lot. But actually, you can get 3,000 calories just in a Domino's pizza. So 3,000 plus really isn't that much of a stretch if you're not careful. And that's why, even though it's only 2 days, the weekend can be so disruptive for so many people. And I know that it is because I originally released the content of this podcast as a newsletter, and it was a really popular newsletter based on analytics. And that's why it would behoove you to follow my 6 strategies. Number 1 is, believe it or not, track your calories. There are very few people who can eat out and drink at the weekend, eyeball their portions, and make progress in a fat loss phase. And these people are usually very experienced dieters. I wouldn't even count myself among them. I would most definitely track my calories if I were to eat out during a fat loss diet. And if you're struggling not to exceed your calorie budget at the weekend, you're not one of these people either. So track. Strategy number 2. Plan your meals and or your drinks ahead of time, because calorie tracking alone won't cut it most of the time. Most people who are blowing their calories at the weekend, even though they are tracking their calories and macros, have this problem in common. They don't know how many calories they're eating until they track them. And often they track in hindsight. And that's when the what the fuck, how could that pasta dish have 1,200 calories moment happens. That's why I encourage my clients to pre-plan and pre-track their meal out, and then budget their calories for the rest of the week around it. This is easiest to do if the menu provides nutritional information, but you can do it even when it doesn't. In fact, I have not one, but 2 podcast episodes all about how to help you estimate calories and macros in a meal out when the food establishment doesn't provide these data. And these episodes are episode 132 and 137. Strategy number 3. Set bright line boundaries, especially around alcohol. A bright line boundary is a clear and unambiguous rule. For example, I'm not going to drink any alcohol, or I'm only going to drink these many of, and you insert a beverage of choice here. For example, I'm only going to drink 3 shots of vodka. You can apply bright line boundaries to any specific aspect of a weekend out that you personally struggle with. But I decided to bring up alcohol specifically because it can very easily derail your fat loss efforts, since it contains a considerable amount of calories, but it's not satiating. Actually, it's quite the opposite. It's dehydrating, and it can give you the munchies as well. But it also, and importantly, lowers your inhibitions, and it makes it harder to make fat loss friendly food choices in the moment. It's not uncommon to have one too many drinks, which can contain several hundred calories on their own. Then you start feeling peckish and you tell yourself, well, 1 peanut won't hurt. And before you know it, you've eaten 5 handfuls of peanuts, 2 packets of crisps, and 3 pieces of cheesecake, and then you proceed to drown the guilt in an extra pint of beer or 6. Strategy number 4, budget your calories accordingly. As I alluded to just earlier in this episode, you don't need to hit the exact same calorie target every single day. You can achieve the same targets over a longer time frame by having higher calorie days and lower calorie days. which is why I give all my clients a weekly calorie range as their fat loss target, as opposed to a daily calorie target like 1500 calories, like any app would do. For example, MyFitnessPal would set you a daily target without showing you the average across the week, which is the most important variable. So it doesn't matter whether you eat 1500 calories 7 days straight, or whether you eat 2000 calories for 2 days and 1300 for the remaining 5. If you average out both options, the outcome is still a weekly average of 1500 calories per day. And the approach of having higher and lower calorie days can be especially successful if you work Monday to Friday, because being busy does wonders for your hunger management and it makes it easier to stick to lower calories on your working days. It's when you're not at work or otherwise occupied that you can get hungrier, usually because you have more time on your hands to get bored and think about food. However, you have to be mindful of your daily energy needs. If you have a very active lifestyle and lift weights, you may not be able to drop your calories as low as someone who's more sedentary with a standard 9 to 5 job. For instance, I train 5 days every week and I have a pretty high step count, between 10 and 15,000 steps per day on average. If I were to go on a fat loss diet and I wanted to have lower calorie days, realistically, since I typically lose fat on around 1500 calories, I wouldn't want to go below 1200 calories on a training day to ensure that I have the energy not only for training, but also for the rest of my life. In your case, how would you know if your calories are too low? Well, you're going to have to go through a trial and error process. If your resistance training sessions, your mood, sleep, hunger, and or your stress levels are taking a larger hit than you're comfortable with, then you've gone too low with your calories. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that you must jump ship if you try a certain amount of calories for one day and it doesn't go too well. That's because a single day could just be a one-off. Whereas if you were to try the same strategy for 2 to 3 days, you could then start seeing a pattern. And if the outcome is negative over and over again, then you've hit an excessively low amount of calories. That's how I personally was able to work out that on 1200 calories, I can still have a productive training session and I can still function throughout the day in a fat loss diet. As a rule of thumb, if you haven't gone through that experimental process yet, I don't recommend lowering your calories by much more than 10% on any one day. So in the case of a 1500 calorie budget, I wouldn't go much below 1350 calories for multiple days in a row. I know personally that I can go down to 1200s. I've never tried lower than 1200 on a training day, so I wouldn't know. But as I've said, this is a rule of thumb for clients who are less experienced than me and who haven't been through the trial and error process I've recommended first. And I don't only recommend being careful with your caloric intake to prevent it from getting too low so that you don't turn into Mr. Hyde on your lower calorie days, but also because it's easier to get enough nutrients when you're on a higher number of calories. And if you're the kind of person who's smaller and or more sedentary and therefore needs to diet on 1800 calories or less, this makes it more and more challenging to get all of the nutrients that you may need. It's not impossible. I don't mean to fearmonger. It's doable. I do it. Most of my clients achieve it under my guidance, but it is something to think about more than when you're comfortably within your maintenance calorie range or in a surplus, or if you're bigger and more active and you have the luxury of dieting on 1800 calories and above. In addition to that, taking this particular strategy to an extreme can become a planned binge restrict cycle for some people, which can then have a negative impact on their long-term relationship with food. Having said that, I'm not completely against lowering your calories by more than 10%. I've literally just told you that 1200 calories works with me, and that's more than 10% below 1500. Some individuals can do it without any of the issues that I've discussed. But those who are most successful with the more extreme version of any nutritional strategy, not just this one, also usually tick the following boxes. They have a lot of experience with successful diets, so they've lost fat and they've maintained that loss long term. They have a stable relationship with food, and they have strong, pre existing health promoting habits. Whereas if you're still in the process of making your lifestyle change, nurturing your relationship with fitness, and understanding nutrition, then you'd likely benefit from being more conservative and possibly staying within the 10% guideline that I gave you. Strategy number 5 is going to sound odd, but hear me out. I'm suggesting that you sleep in. Because if you sleep in and skip breakfast, you're essentially intermittent fasting, which means you're reducing your eating window. That is the time frame within which you eat. And this makes it far easier not to go overboard with your calories while still enjoying a meal out with some drinks potentially. That's why intermittent fasting has been so successful and it's still very popular. It's not because it's magical, calories still count and are the top priority, but it's because when you have a smaller number of hours within which to eat, people tend to eat less without as much of an effort. And while this strategy can work with any meal, it is especially beneficial if you're having brunch because you can almost literally roll out of bed, roll into the restaurant, and then usually have enough calories left for dinner and maybe even an afternoon snack, even after having had brunch. Sleeping in is also a valuable component of the approach because of course, you could just fast until brunch time. And if it works for you, awesome. For example, I'm not particularly fast about breakfast, and sometimes when I'm not training in the morning, then I skip it and I don't eat until lunch. But I also don't feel like I'm particularly famished if I go without food until midday. Unlike me, some people can get so hangry that they'll end up overeating later in the day. And that's when I do not recommend fasting, and I'd rather you just slept and then woke up and roll into the restaurant. The sixth and final strategy for this episode is to plan filling, highly nutritious, and lower calorie breakfast options. If fasting doesn't work for you, you can still save some calories on a weekend day without having to starve yourself. Because, as I've said, if you try to fast or you try to have too little food, you can end up eating your fill at the restaurant and then eating the table and then eating the server and then eating your friends. You get my point. It's not ideal. The solution to prevent this while not fasting is to have a low calorie, high protein, high volume breakfast. And this type of breakfast is any combination of lean protein and fruit or vegetables because these combos contain minimal calories whilst being very filling and highly nutritious. You can come up with whatever lean protein plus fruit and veg combo that you like. These are some suggestions from me that fit the bill. Suggestion number 1, 0% fat, Greek yogurt, flavored protein powder, and fruit of choice, especially if the fruit is frozen. My current personal favorites consists of 225 grams of 0% fat Greek yogurt, 25 grams of lemon-flavored clear whey isolate protein powder, and 100 to 125 grams of fresh blueberries rather than frozen, which comes out at around 271 calories with 46 grams of protein. And I recommend mixing the protein powder into the yogurt so that you add flavor and you make it creamier. Personally, I love using vegan protein powder because you can add some water to it in addition to the yogurt to make it into a pudding-like consistency. And the water, in addition to the protein powder, in addition to the yogurt, gives you a more voluminous portion than if you used whey, where you don't really need any extra water. You can just mix it into the yogurt. Soy isolate is the lowest calorie, highest protein vegan protein powder that I know of. Depending on the brand, it can be just as low calorie as whey isolate, which is usually one of the most calorie friendly types of protein powder. Now, if you're under such dire circumstances that you really need to save as many calories as possible, then your best option is clear whey isolate, which is also known as whey hydrolysate, because it's the lowest calorie option that I've ever found that also mixes well with Greek yogurt. And now, to wrap up this particular food suggestion, I want to expand on why I suggested frozen fruit. Because you want to mix it with the yogurt and the powder before the fruit thaws. Then you want to leave the bowl in the fridge overnight. As the fruit defrosts, the fruit juice is going to seep into the Greek yogurt, and that makes it taste incredible. If you use vanilla protein powder and a thick Greek yogurt like Fage, it's going to be reminiscent of cheesecake. My second combo suggestion is turkey bacon and vegetables. 6 slices of low-fat turkey bacon contain around 175 calories and 37 grams of protein. If you have this with a side salad of about 100 grams of fresh spinach leaves and 150 grams of cherry tomatoes with a bit of salt and pepper, it comes out at 220 calories in total with some fiber and 37 grams of protein. And the third and final combination is a recipe of mine, a high protein wrap. It comes out at 234 calories and 40 grams of protein. And in order to bump up the fiber content and to add extra vitamins and minerals, I usually add some fruit, like strawberries or raspberries. The recipe that I'm going to discuss makes one large wrap or 2 smaller wraps, depending on the size of the pan that you're going to use. These are the ingredients. You want 40 grams of self-rising wholemeal flour, 20 grams of vanilla whey isolate powder or any other flavor of your choice. Chocolate is another favorite of mine. 30 grams of granulated erythritol, 150 ml of egg whites, liquid egg whites, and 30 grams of 0% fat yogurt. I did my best to articulate this, and you can always rewind the podcast to note every ingredient down. Now, the recipe itself is super simple. You just mix all of this in a bowl and you stir until you get a lump-free batter. Then you want to fry it on both sides for a few minutes. If you use a non-stick pan, you don't need any oil, and you don't necessarily need to add any low-calorie oil spray. I make it purely just with a non-stick pan, and I also put a lid on the pan because I don't know, it comes out well. I couldn't tell you if it's better without the lid, but I always use a lid and it works out really well for me. I'm not a cook here, I'm just trying to help. Anyway, these are 6 of my most effective strategies to prevent the weekend from messing up your fat loss diet over and over again. Because you don't have to give up food and alcohol at the weekend if it's an important part of your life, but you can't wing it and expect to see results. So as a recap, these are the strategies that I recommend. Track your calories, plan your meals and or drinks ahead of time, set bright line boundaries, budget your calories for the rest of the week accordingly, sleep in, and have filling, highly nutritious, and lower calorie breakfast options. This way, you're going to be able to budget for the caloric content of these eating experiences ahead of time. so you can have the extra flexibility to eat, drink, and remain in a deficit. And that's a wrap for today's podcast. Thank you very much for listening. And as always, if you're looking for an online coach to help you get closer to your desired physique and lifestyle transformation, guess what? You found it. That is me. I'm that coach. I want to be that coach. So use the link in the show notes to fill out the application form on my website. You can also read more about the service and pricing, and you can see other client transformations and their own testimonials so that you can get an idea of just how amazing I am if this podcast wasn't good enough. Other than that, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a rating or a review to help get the podcast out to a larger audience so that I can also get better and better guests to share their knowledge with you. And on that note, thanks so much for being generous with your time, and I'll talk to you soon. Lastly, if you want to support the podcast and help me reach more people, please leave a 5-star rating or review on any podcast platform that you're using. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.